Refugee Kayan people live off the land in Thailand, and they are known as the giraffe women. I'm sure you've seen pictures of the women that have brass rings around their necks and elongated their necks and thought of how this beauty came to be. The origin of the neck stretching is mysterious. It dates back as far as the 11th century, but there is no concrete evidence on exactly why it began. Some speculate that villagers wore the brass rings around their necks in defense against tiger attacks, and some say that it makes them look unappealing to other villages. Today, the practice is still alive and well, but it continues as tradition and monetization. As beautiful and elegant the neck stretching is, it attracts tourists and allows the Kayan people to capitalize on it. The tourists may not always be welcoming, but it provides them food and education for future generations. The girls start at an early age of 5 years old. The coils start at 4.5 pounds and more coils are added on as they grow older. Kayan women often say that their purpose for wearing the rings is culture, identity, and beauty. As for the science of it, it is not actually the neck that stretches. The collarbone and ribcage are compressed from the weight of the rings that causes the deformation on the body. The main problems that can occur from this are muscle dystrophy, infection issues from the brass, and discomfort. However, this didn't stop the culture from continuing this tradition for hundreds of years. The neck stretching is as bizarre as it sounds, but if the Kayan women came to America and saw women getting liposuction, breast implants, and plastic surgery, what would they think? The harder question might be, which one is more culturally bizarre? Again, we see that beauty does not have a universal standard. Another beauty standard we wanted to discuss is Chinese foot binding. Foot binding is the process of changing the bone structure in your feet and preventing future growth. And the Chinese did this because in their culture, small feet were equated with beauty. The smaller one's feet, the more attractive they were considered to be. The Chinese tradition of foot binding lasted around 1,000 years, beginning in the Tang Dynasty in China and lasting until the 20th century. The process of foot binding began with soaking a child's foot in warm water and a mixture of herbs and animal blood. The person binding the foot then would curl the last 4 toes over the foot, leaving the big one pointing forward, and bind them extremely tightly with cotton bandages. They broke their toes and created an unnatural arch in the foot. The desired result of foot binding was to have feet no longer than 10 centimeters, and these feet were known as lotus feet after the Buddhist symbol for. In lower class families, parents often bound their children's feet in an attempt to raise their prospective social status, because when parents were arranging marriages, bound feet were a desired trait they looked for. This resulted in a heavy social pressure to bind their daughter's feet. There were many issues caused by the foot binding, including infections, gangrene, and toenail loss, as well as a permanent loss of mobility. Chinese women actually had to adopt a new style of walking in order to get around the house. It also limited the role that women could undertake in society due to their lack of mobility. The Chinese proverb found on this page translated roughly into, "If you care for your children, do not worry if your son suffers for his studies or your daughter for her feet." In other words, men were expected to be scholars, women were expected to have tiny feet. Since typical household employment for women consisted of sewing, spinning, weaving, and embroidery, the lack of mobility caused by foot binding was not viewed as an issue. The women's place was in the house, and bound feet ensured a woman could not walk or run very far. Additionally, Neo-Confucianism was similar to the state religion of China. It placed emphasis on obedience, chastity, and diligence. Foot binding and the daily suffering was viewed by women as a showcase of their obligation to Confucian values. There are many lessons to be learned from the Chinese cultural tradition of foot binding, including there is no universal standard for beauty, beauty is not worth the cost of your health, and beauty standards often illustrate a culture's gender biases.